to go. Good. Call the September 24th, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Borowitz.
Here.
Brooks.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
Porter.
Here.
Ratcliffe. Sanderson.
Here.
Snow.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Under public comment this evening, a couple of things, and thank you, Alderman Porter, for mentioning this too. I wanted to say a few words in thanking the police department, the fire department, and the school district for the way that they responded to the shutdown that we had. Thank goodness nobody was hurt, as it turned out. I think everybody knows the details. But the idea that it was an opportunity for us to test what our process and procedure is was a very good exercise for us, and I think everybody involved did a terrific job, and thank you from all of us. Also, wanted to let everybody know at home that BNS Radio is off the air and will not be broadcasting, but we will be broadcasting on YouTube. Is that correct? So log into YouTube. So we haven't lost the function, we've just lost the form. Under public forum this evening, you want to talk now, Alderman Snow? Okay, and Dan Snow's asked to talk to us about a zoning issue.
Just to let you guys know that it appears that Plody, again, is trying to do a zoning change in the premise of doing a pre-annexation agreement down south here. So just be aware that's coming up. There is a zoning meeting, so you might want to attend that and be informed.
September 19th, I think.
October 9th.
October 19th, I'm sorry.
9th.
I know we had a 9.
That's the zoning meeting, Mark?
Yeah, that's
9th. Okay, thank you for that. Under reports of officers, boards, and special committees, under number 1, public safety, unfinished business, we have none. Under public safety, new business, we have a guest this evening from the Alliance Against Intoxicated Motorists, Heather Lopez. Would you like to come forward, Heather? How are you tonight?
A little nervous.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know what? You're nothing to be nervous about. You got half the police force.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance Against Intoxicated Motorists, an organization that helps the victims of drunk driving, not just the people who are directly affected, but also the families. Alliance Against Intoxicated Motorists provides court advocates to go with you when you have to go to court for the duration of the case. In my instance, it was 7 years. I'll get to that in a minute. AIM also provides financial support to victims. I also was a recipient of that. After what happened to my husband, we needed a furnace. He was out of work, and AIM helped us with that. So on behalf of the entire Alliance Against Intoxicated Motorists, I'd like to thank all these gentlemen for providing great service and helping to keep our roadways free of drunk drivers. And again, something we mentioned also is that DUI is not just drunk driving, it's under the influence. Could be drugs, prescribed or otherwise. Brief history of another reason why I'm part of AIM. 12 years ago, my husband was hit by a drunk driver while he was walking on Appleton Road. At the time, the gentleman was tested 2 hours after the crash. His blood alcohol was 0.185. It was determined later by an expert witness that he was 0.285 at the time he hit my husband. Didn't know he hit anybody or anything. I have Chief Woody and Deputy Chief Wallace to thank for their great investigative skills. in that crash. My husband was a state policeman. Oddly enough, he worked with the breath alcohol section. First words out of my mouth that night when I got to the hospital was, "The guy drunk." Why would I ask that at 9:30? I don't know, but I just did. Received great support from Belvidere Police Department, the state police. My husband was out of work for a year, at which time, again, AIM supported me. They were there when I needed someone to talk to. They provided a court advocate for the entire 7-year process of our civil trial. My husband was out of work for a year. The state police found another position for him to work in until such a time as he could retire. It's been a long 12 years, and without the support of people like these and getting drunk drivers off our roads, it was difficult, but I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We understand how difficult it is to get up here and share these experiences with all of us, some of who you've just met. But it's important, and Heather as well as Art and Kelly Crimser realize how important it is to share those experiences and how it's impacted not only their lives but their families' lives. So, and I think it's important to emphasize, because it just kind of puts into perspective how important it is that the job that these officers do on a nightly basis, going out and arresting not only drivers under the influence of alcohol, but drugs, intoxicating compounds as well. So again, thank you for coming on behalf of AIM. And as far as the AIM awards go, officers from our department that AIM recognizes for outstanding achievement in the enforcement of drivers under the influence. The first award is going to go to Officer Joe McDermott. Joe. Joe, if I could just have you come up and just say a couple of words. I know you're waiting for that. So,
Yeah. I'd just like to thank everybody for taking a moment out of their busy schedule to recognize us. I always try to make it a goal of mine to make it here every year. That means I'm doing my job. So I appreciate the recognition. So thank you.
next, if I could have Officer Christopher Garcia step forward, please, and receive your award as well. Chris, congratulations. Have you say a couple words?
Like Officer McDermott said, we're just doing our job. We don't expect anything, but we do appreciate the acknowledgement, and hopefully us enforcing the roadways like we do does make some sort of difference.
And last but definitely not least, Officer Matthew Korn, if you would step forward, please. Congratulations.
Thank you. I guess I'll just reiterate what everyone else said. I appreciate you guys coming out and, giving us the honor of getting this award. We don't do it for the awards, but it's nice to be able to get these people off the street before they actually hurt somebody. Most of our times, it's very rare that we get them after the fact. Usually, it's all preventative, and so it brings us, a lot of joy when we can stop them before they do any damage. So, just thank you guys for coming out. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you all very much for allowing us to have this this time.
Job well done. Thank you. And thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you. Next up under B, we have an ordinance creating educational preferences for promotion within the City of Belvidere Police Department.
Mr. Mayor, this comes as an initiative from the police department, actually from the rank and file. Let Chief Woody get to that in a second. In your packets was a draft ordinance that contains some strikeout and underlines. Please note this is an entirely new ordinance, not a change to existing code. The strikeout and underlines were actually editor's notes going back and forth between myself and the attorney from the Police and Fire Commission. So the ordinance that's being proposed includes the underline, does not include the strikeout, but it's entirely new ordinance. And essentially what it aims to do is to add additional preference points that are available to members of the police department. In addition to just having military possible preference points, it would also allow educational preference points in addition to that. I'll let Chief Woody speak more to it.
Thank you, Attorney Drella. Yeah, we had this brought to us as a recommendation from officers within the department who have taken the tests for sergeant, and they have college education. However, they're not receiving any additional points like the preference points that military officers with military experience get. So they've requested that we talk to the Fire and Police Commission, see if they would take into consideration creating a rule allowing preference points for qualifying education. When we talked to the commission, referenced that on advice of council, they thought it would be prudent to have the city council consider creating an ordinance, giving them the authority to make that rule and regulation within the Fire and Police Commission code. So what it would do is allow those that have qualifying educational points get additional 3.5 points at the end of the promotional testing.
Can I have a motion to support that?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Alderman Crawford, second by Alderman Porter. Questions and comments? Alderman Snow, then Alderman Sanderson.
And so, obviously for the education part, so is the military 3.5 and the education is 3.5, and they're separate?
That's correct. Currently, the code says that military get 0.7 of a point for every 6 months worth of qualifying experience up to 30 months, which would be a total of 3.5 points. In order to keep that language, we potentially could have somebody with educational preference points getting total 3.5 points, with military only getting partial points. So to keep it consistent, we're proposing if you have qualifying military or qualifying education, you get the 3.5 points.
No.
They are not cumulative, and you can only use each set of points one time.
Alderman Sanderson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I was going to ask the question about cumulative, but also, is there any other departments in the state of Illinois that have done this? Is this mirrored off of anything, or are we the first one in the state of Illinois to do this besides the military, or what?
To my knowledge, there aren't any within northern Illinois that have this same language. What we have done to keep things consistent is we've mirrored the entry-level testing language, which does allow for both preference for educational and military.
Alderman Freeman.
So rather than an ordinance, seems to me like this maybe should be something that's within your contract?
No, this is actually required by law to be adopted as an ordinance.
Additional questions or comments? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? So this will pass forward to the City Council for final disposition. Thank you. Next up, we have a closure request from the Fire Department for their open house. Chief, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Thanks, Mayor. On October 7th, we'll be having an open house. And in order to have a safe open house, in the safest open house possible, the Belvidere Fire Department, we're requesting to close State Street from the north side of the State Street Bridge to 130 South State at the PNC Bank. The closing will facilitate safe foot traffic and allow for the safe landing of the OSF Lifeline helicopter. The hours of closure will be from noon to 4 o'clock on October 7th, 2018.
A motion to approve.
Make that motion.
Motion by Alderman Crawford, second. Alderman Borowitz. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You got it. Under Finance and Personnel, unfinished business, we have none. Under Finance and Personnel, new business, we have a bit. First up, we have the Sikich audit presentation. Gentlemen?
We have Fred Lance and Nick Bava here from Sikich to present.
Floor is yours.
Good evening. On behalf of Sikich LLP, we'd like to thank the mayor and the members of the council for inviting us here this evening to present the information resulting from our audit of the city as of and for your fiscal year ended April 30th, 2018. As a result of our audit, you should have 3 documents before you for your review and approval. The annual financial report, which is also known as the audit report, that should be the thicker of the 3 documents that's before you this evening. In addition to that, you'll see a management letter. The management letter is required by Illinois compiled statutes as a separate document to put up on your website. And then last but certainly not least, after that, we have the auditor's communication to the members of the city council. What I thought I'd do, Mr. Mayor, is briefly review the audit report and then certainly address any questions that yourself or any council members have in regards to these documents.
Please proceed.
Oh, I apologize. There was one additional document, and that's the annual TIF examination report. That was filed under separate cover and goes before your joint review board. But we're pleased to note to the mayor and the council that we did issue an unmodified opinion on the TIF examination in compliance with the TIF statutes. So, turning with us then to the thicker the 3 documents before you, and it's always a good sign that this is the thicker of the 3 documents. With this being the thickest of the 3 documents, we can have a much shorter presentation before the committee than we would have if this was the smaller of the 3 documents. So if you turn with me in that document to page number 1, so go past the table of contents, you'll come to regular page number 1, and that's the independent auditor's report. We're only responsible for 3 pages in this document, and these are the 3 pages right here. The rest is the responsibility of the city and the library, and y'all do a very good job at keeping the books and enabling the city to be able to put together a set of financial statements like this, and more importantly, publish them within your 6-month deadline. Many governments strive to have these published within 6 months at the end of their fiscal year. You're actually here seeking council approval in less than 5 months after the fiscal year end with your financial information. If you're with us on page number 1 then, for the independent auditor's report, please note on the first page that we're responsible for issuing an opinion on the financial statements, but management overall is responsible for the financial statements themselves. On the next page, on the top of page number 2, you'll come across the first paragraph titled Opinions. That's, I think, the most important paragraph. We're very pleased to present to the mayor and the members of the city council a clean, unmodified opinion on the financial statements of the city and the library that's included as a discretely presented component unit. Our opinion notes that your financial statements do present fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and that they're free of any material misstatement. Also note below that we do review your management discussion and analysis as well as the pension trend information, but auditing standards prohibit us from issuing an opinion on those. So we do check them very, very closely, but we cannot issue an opinion on them. On the bottom of page number 2, though, we do subject the rest of the document to our audit procedures and do provide what we call an in relation to opinion on the rest of the document, with 2 minor exceptions, and those are on the top of page number 3. We do not issue an opinion on the list of principal officials, nor do we issue an opinion on some of the supplementary information at the very end. Other than that, we have covered the entire document by one level of our opinion or another. If you turn immediately past the next page called General Purpose External Financial Statements, the divider page, you should come across a page that's paginated at the bottom with MD&A number 1, and it's titled City of Belvidere, Illinois, Management Discussion and Analysis. If you as a council member get through nothing else in this document, or better yet, if you share nothing else with the resident, with the taxpayer, with the voter, or one of your neighbors, if you share nothing else with them, share the management discussion and analysis. It's a very, very well-written management discussion and analysis. It's put together by your chief financial officer with input to a certain degree by the library. And while Nick and I understand numbers and really like to talk numbers, this is written in a layperson terminology, and while it has some numbers, it also has some wonderful graphical presentations and really discusses why the numbers changed between last year and this year. It's about 12 pages long, and it's probably the most useful component of this entire document. So, again, if you get through nothing else or share nothing else with the residents, please by all means take a look through the management discussion and analysis and share that with your neighbors. I'm going to skip over all those pages, though, that are paginated with the MD&A at the bottom. And if you skip past, you'll come across page MD&A number 12. If you skip right past that, you'll come to regular page number 4. Regular page number 4 is the statement of net position for the city as a whole. What the statement of net position does is it provides a reader with a long-term perspective on the consolidated financial statements for the city as a whole. So this is very similar to financial statements that somebody in the private sector would put together. So yes, if you're on pages 4 and 5 on the bottom, that's the statement of net position. You'll see it has 4 columns: governmental activities, which is the city's general fund, your motor fuel tax fund, the TIF fund, and some other funds. The business type activity column, which is your water and sewer. And then a total column for the city as a whole. That is a consolidated total for the city. And then what we call the component unit is presented after that, which is the public library. The key figure that I think you might be most interested in is on page number 5, the second line up from the bottom, called unrestricted deficit. You can see you do have an unrestricted deficit from a long-term perspective of about $22 million. I'd like to take just a moment to explain that deficit, because again, it's taking a look from a very, very long-term perspective. You might recall that 3 years ago, the city for the first time had to record some liabilities for your pension obligations. Historically, we had not recorded those. We only disclosed those in the notes of the financial statements. 3 years ago, you were required first to start recording those. The effect in the current year was the police pension plan ended up with about a $13.6 million liability, and they are about 61% funded now as of April 30th, 2018, so their funded status has come up. The fire pension plan is has a pension liability of about $11.5 million, and they're at about 57.5% funded. Again, a good improvement in the funding status. I think the most, or the pension plan you should be most proud of is IMRF, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which is where your non-uniformed employees participate. That liability is down to $140,000, and overall it's funded at about 98.5% funded. Very, very good funded status for that plan. So overall, if you combine those 3 pension plans, the liabilities from those 3, that's what's causing that unrestricted deficit position that you see on page number 5. I wish I could tell you, Mr. Mayor and council members, that number would get better next year, but it's actually going to get worse next year. Next year, the city's going to have to implement what we call GASB statement number 75 on accounting for retiree health insurance. Historically, we've only accounted for the cost of retiree health insurance as the actuary tells us we should contribute to that. Just like we made that change 3 years ago in accounting for pensions, we're now going to make that same change next year in accounting for retiree health insurance. So instead of accounting for the cost when it's funded by the city, instead you're going to account for the cost as it's earned by one of the employees. So that will greatly accelerate your expense and liability recognition. We anticipate that this might add about another $4 or $5 million in liabilities to the city's unrestricted net position that you see on pages 4 and 5. Hopefully that will be the last long-term operating liability, though, that the city will need to record on its long-term perspective financial statements. From there, I'm going to skip over to pages, 8 and 9. Pages 8 and 9 is also a balance sheet, but we actually call it a balance sheet. Whereas the other statement that we looked at, I said had a long-term perspective on how the city is financed. This gives us a very, very short-term perspective as to how the city is financed. So you'll notice there's 3 columns here also: your general fund, what we call non-major governmental funds, and then your total governmental funds. I think here the key figures that the mayor and the council are interested in is on the bottom of page 9, focusing on that first column, the general column. And you'll note 3 lines up from the bottom is an unassigned line with a number of about $8,085,000 and change in it. That's your unassigned fund balance of the general fund as of April 30th, 2018. Very good fund balance for the city to end up with. So from a long-term perspective, you have a deficit due to the pensions, but from a short-term perspective, you have fund balance in your general fund and are doing pretty well from the general fund standpoint. You have a fund balance target of 25% of your current year expenditures, or about 3 months of your current year's expenditures, to have that down in fund balance. We're pleased to report to the mayor and the city council that you have exceeded that as of April 30th, 2018. So you're a little bit over your balance as of April 30th, 2018. It's always good to be over that balance as opposed to under that balance. If you turn with me to the next page, page 11. So we'll skip over page 10. The only people who like to talk about page 10 are accounting geeks who really like to talk accounting. Page 11 is the income statement for your governmental funds. And the key figure I wanted to point out for the mayor and the council on this page is, again, the 3rd line up from the bottom. It's called net change in fund balances. Overall, your general fund with about $16.7 million in revenues and $16.5 million in expenses pretty much broke even for the year. You can see at the end of the year you had a small drawdown in your fund balance of about $69,000. We would pretty much consider that to be a break-even standpoint for your general fund on a short-term basis. That concludes the very brief presentation we prepared for this evening's meeting, Mr. Mayor. We'd be happy to address any questions that yourself or any council members might have in regards to these documents we've submitted for your review and approval.
Council, questions for the accountants? Hearing none, I have a motion to approve the audit.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Alderman Crawford, second by Alderman Borowitz. Since we have no more questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The audit as presented is approved. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's been a pleasure working with you. I have to tell you, your folks that work here in the city are very pleasant, very thorough, and we enjoyed having them.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate that feedback. We also appreciate working with representatives of the city. We find the same with the representatives of the city that we work with. Very, very professional, very competent, provide us with all the information that we ask for on a very timely basis. So.
Win-win. Next up, we have a presentation by As of Our Audit Work Product. Do you want to preface this, Becky, so we know what they're going to be talking about, the council in general?
Yes, Scott Schomburg, if you want to come on up. If you recall, earlier in the year, maybe late last year, I brought a proposal for you to hire Azavar Audit Solutions to help us uncover any issues with taxes, utilities, our utility tax, things like that. And so they've been working for many months on this project, and this was kind of a large finding that they found, so we thought it was appropriate that Scott came and presented this.
Hello, Mayor, council members, Belvidere staff members. Thanks for having me tonight. As Becky mentioned, I'm Scott Schamberg. I'm Vice President at As of Our Government Solutions. The city had hired us to make sure that the city's getting all the revenue it's due from its tax sources, so utility taxes being among them. And we look at, one of the things we had looked at was your gas utility taxes, and currently the city has a 5% tax on gas delivery within its corporate boundaries. And give you a little background here about to understand what we found. Back in 2002, the state deregulated the gas energy market and allowed users to purchase gas from other providers other than the utility provider, in this case Nicor. Gas became to be available from what we call alternative gas suppliers. These gas suppliers have become very plentiful all over the place, but unfortunately there was, due to deregulation, there's these alternative gas suppliers could come from over state lines. So residents and businesses could purchase this gas from over state lines, and therefore it constitutes interstate commerce, meaning it's no longer able to be taxed by the municipal utility tax. Basically, it becomes a big loophole. And it results in a growing disparity, because what happens is those residents and businesses who are buying their gas from Nicor continue to pay the utility tax, while those who are buying from alternative gas suppliers are no longer paying that utility tax. When we started going through the information for Belvidere, we were looking at two things. First, we were looking at the addresses to make sure that all the addresses were properly coded in Nicor's records, that they were collecting from everyone they should be. And then we were also looking at the revenue computation to make sure that they were computing that 5% correctly. When our analysts started going through the data, the first thing that stuck out to them was that the tax remittances from Nicor looked extremely low for the Belvidere size and for the composition of its land use. We then did an analysis using data from Nicor, the city, the Illinois Commerce Commission, and other utility providers, and found that roughly 75% of the city's revenues were being delivered by alternative gas suppliers. The results, as Becky mentioned, were pretty staggering. What this indicates is that in fiscal year 2017, the city did not capture $925,000 in utility tax revenues. But luckily, there is a fix for this. What we had, our recommendation was that if you will put into place a gas use tax, which would plug the loophole, essentially taxing the use of the gas within Belvidere's corporate boundaries. This would ensure fairness for all residents and businesses within the city and avoid any more loss in revenue from the increased use of purchasing over state lines. Those customers currently purchasing gas from Nicor would not be affected by this. There would be no effect to them. But it would only have an effect on those who are currently not paying the tax. It would create fairness. It would create what was originally intended by Belvidere, which is that everyone is taxed at the same rate and contributes to that tax. That was our finding, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mike, did you want to share? Thank you.
I guess I can speak briefly. He mentioned the regulation of the 2000s, and what happened was, in part, Illinois state statute provides really a conundrum. It's really unfair in a sense. Section 8-11-2 of the Illinois Municipal Code allows municipalities, and specifically non-home rule municipalities, which we were at the time, to gas the use of electricity on a per kilowatt hour. So anybody that uses electricity anywhere in the city, they pay a tax to use that electricity, and it's based on kilowatt hour. Conversely, the gas tax, and we're talking natural gas for heating and things like that, it's actually on the right to sell or transmit the gas within the city. So instead of the tax being on the user, it's upon the supplier. And it's based on percentage of the gross receipts as opposed to the therms used. And what that did is it created a conundrum with the U.S. Constitution, because under the U.S. Constitution, you cannot tax interstate commerce. So if we try to tax the supplier, and they happen to be Wisconsin, Nevada, anywhere but Illinois, we cannot tax that sale. Now, if you switch it over to a user tax, the same as electricity is done, then you level the playing field for all of your users. Because, as was stated, some are paying it, some aren't, just based upon who they choose as their supplier. What's interesting to me is I kind of wonder how this will all play out with the recent changes on internet sales and the ability to tax across state lines on that. But this is a much easier and more simple and fair solution if the council elects to go that way and try and close this loophole.
In essence, the state got cute in how they programmed this, and I would love to open an investigation on how that happened. Yes.
I'm just curious, who does the footwork to find out who's using other than Nicor? How do you go about doing that?
In terms of who's using what? Supplier?
Yeah.
Nicor knows who's, because either they're supplying it or they're not, so they know who, Nicor knows who. Unfortunately, due to state law, they can't share any information about their individual users, so we can't know who specifically is purchasing those from over state lines.
So how does the city find out?
So what would
How do we
happen
do
is, if you instituted the gas use tax, Nicor would then collect the tax as was mentioned on the therms, on the use of the gas, and still, so it would still come from Nicor, the payment would still come from Nicor. They'll just collect it for you and remit it to the city.
From the other vendors.
From the other vendors, yes.
Without violating the U.S. Constitution and crossing state lines.
Could, Scott, when we had talked about it, the understanding was that most of this, or a lot of this, is actually our industrial users, correct? Not so much your residents.
Yes.
This is mostly industrial users.
Yeah, because of the size that we're looking at, we would believe that this is coming from industrial-sized users, and also just in general, the difference for a residential user is per month is maybe $1 or $2, so not enough of an incentive for them to go and look for a new alternative gas supplier. Some do. In fact, one of the addresses that we corrected did in fact do that during our audit period, but the industrial and commercial sized users are more inclined to do that because they are much larger users, and therefore they get they have more incentive to find alternative gas suppliers to keep costs down.
It's quite a lot of money.
Yes.
Yes, Alderman Sanderson, then this side of it. Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. So basically, our constituents aren't going to notice any difference for the ones that are already paying. This is how they did the same calculation for the ones that were using Nicor. It's just the other ones weren't taken out for that, and that's how they got some of the cheaper rates, maybe, right?
So originally everyone was paying the 5%, and then as they bought gas from these alternative gas suppliers, if they started doing that, they stopped paying the utility tax.
So look at it as offshore suppliers were not paying us for what they were selling to the end users here. Yes.
So I'm not a big fan of the utility tax in the first place, but You said 75% of, that's not residents. You're not talking about 75% of the residents.
It's 75% of addresses, it's 75% of the revenues that you would be collecting from within Belvidere. That's residential, commercial, and industrial all lumped in.
Okay, so, you know, my opinion on that is, if you're a resident and you're always looking for a way to lower your household bills, and, you know, if you can find an outside supplier, then more power to you. But if this is mainly industrial, then, yeah, I'm all for it.
Alderman Porter, then Alderman Borowitz.
Well, just so I have this straight here, this all came about because of the aggregation that we went through then, when it has to do with who you chose?
No.
Desegregation, as opposed to aggregation. Aggregation.
Deregulation.
Not desegregation, thank you, deregulation. I misspoke. No, aggregation is where the city or the township or the county can go together and request bids to find one supplier for the entire community, and thereby hopefully find the lowest price electricity usually for the constituents. But back in the early 2000s, the state deregulated on the gas side. They also did on electric too, but on the gas side, and no longer did you have to buy your gas from NICOR. You know, and when everybody bought the gas through NICOR, it was no problem because NICOR was local, it was a 5%, everybody paid the same tax. But when they deregulated, they didn't change the computation of how they calculate the tax, which meant that if I went and bought my gas in Wisconsin, I no longer had to pay that 5%. So that's how this all came about. There's no way it can be fixed until you're a home rule unit. As a non-home rule, we cannot fix it, but as a home rule, we can now. And I do know that there are several communities that have done that are home rules.
Many.
Yes.
So do we know how many, you know, ballpark, how many residents would actually be affected by this? Because like I said, you know, if I can spend $3 for a gallon of milk at Pacemaker, or, you know, $1.50 at Aldi's, you know, I should be able to go to Aldi's.
Sure, and I mean, and they can still get less, you know, a cheaper price on the actual gas cost. But what's happening here is they're not paying the tax that, you know, their neighbor is, and that's creating an inequality along those lines.
And it's a big number, which is where we reach the conclusion it's primarily industrial users, because that makes sense. I mean, that's the size of that number. Yes, Alderman Sanderson.
Yeah, and if any of our constituents want to revert back, even with the electric, I know I had some people ask me, you know, because we do an aggregate, you know, every year or sometimes, how do they get back to where they want? Do they call the gas company, electric company to go back? If for some reason their bills start going up because they'll notice the difference and they realize it's better to go back to NICOR or whatever. How do we do that? How do our customers get back? Can they cancel at any time, or?
Yeah, they can. If your residents want to go back to NICOR, they can at any time. And there's no aggregation on this one. This is just individuals.
Yeah, but if someone wants to go back to the electric bid that we have.
It's not an electric bid.
I know, but I'm asking that question because it kind of relates to.
This is not the same kind of a process. What this is if they're buying natural gas from outside the state, they're not paying the tax at all, okay? And they're paying, and everybody else who is in the state and getting their gas from NICOR is. And so the state changed the formula when they deregulated. They didn't change it for gas. So there's a loophole there that folks can buy their gas supply somewhere else. I think the statement was made that the calculation was at best it would cost residents $1 or $2 a month difference.
Yeah.
Because it's primarily not the individual users. And $1 or $2 a month, if you look at it, that results in $900,000 that comes back into city coffers. That allows us to do a lot of the things that we're concerned about trying to do. So that's why we hired these guys.
I got all that.
Okay.
You know, I appreciated that.
I think I understand the question. If you're
But I
buying
was
from
just
out of
asking
state,
about the electric too, since I was
right
on there. How do people go back to our electric you know, if they don't want to go through ComEd, they want to go, or
They simply
have
opt out of it and
different-
revert to ComEd.
And
Or-
vice versa.
Right.
If they want to opt out of ComEd and join the aggregation, can they do it on the reverse side?
Yes.
They can opt out, but now, here's where it gets a little tricky, though. Sometimes those suppliers will charge them. Our, like,
The new
like
rate.
for ComEd, where we have Dynegy, they won't charge to switch, but whoever their other supplier is could charge them.
Okay.
I don't know about how it is with the gas suppliers.
Yeah, but they were asking me about that too, so that's why I thought.
They're all in to make money, so.
Right, it all depends on the contract, what their specific contract has with their supplier of the electricity, and what that contract says, what they signed up for.
Yeah, and I believe Alderman Borowitz had a question or comment? Oh, thank you. Alderman Stevens.
Is there such a thing as the city going out for bids on the gas like electricity, or is that nothing?
Doesn't really happen. There's, no. Mm-mm.
It is out there, though, that we have been solicited for the opportunities to do that, but we have chosen not to.
So Becky, you want this to come back in ordinance and then we'll start the process?
It's the council's voters.
Right, I guess that's, we want, you know, we wanted to provide you with this information. It was pretty substantial information and wanted your opinion as to how you would like to proceed.
So do you want this to come back in ordinance form so you can look at it and we'll start the process? Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second it.
Additional questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this will come back in ordinance form for final disposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to other, and under A, we have the diffuser replacement bid tabulation for the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Memo in your packet. We have some diffusers in our aeration tanks at the wastewater treatment plant that need to be replaced. In the course of the mill, we have 1,152 of them to be exact. We received 2 bids to do that work. Aeration works, $128,036.24. I would recommend approval of their bid to complete the diffuser replacement project at the wastewater treatment plant, and this work will be paid for from our sewer depreciation fund.
Motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Alderman Brooks, second, please. Second by Alderman Borowitz. Questions or comments? Alderman Snow.
And was this in our budget per se?
Not necessarily in the budget, but it's coming out of the depreciation account, which is our account that we set up, our savings account to handle this kind of work. So the diffuser's life expectancy is about 10 years, and we're a little short on that now, but based on what we're seeing out there in the field, in the tanks themselves, it was determined that it's time to replace them.
Additional questions or comments? Alderman Sanderson?
Just to follow up on, did we have any warranties, or are we all out of them, or, you say it lasts about 10 years, what's a warranty on it?
Well, the warranty is going to be the standard 12 months on installation. However, 12 months on the installation work when that work's done, but that's it for as far as warranty goes.
Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Okay, Alderman Frank.
I basically got my question answered, but are you doing all of them at once just to be preventative and it's just cheaper to do it all at once?
We're doing them all at once, but it's staged, and that's relative to why you see the cost is what it is. Because we have a total of 6 aeration tanks down there, and that's part of the daily process at the wastewater treatment plant, so we can't drain them all down and do them all at once and get the contractor in and out. We have to do one at a time. So we will drain the first tank down and clean it ourselves. The contractor will then come in and begin work on that one. While he's working on that one, we'll start the draining process on the second one. And then as soon as the first one's done, we'll start filling that first one back up, and it's a rotational through the system. But yes, we're going to do all of them at once.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was a great,
All right. All those in favor of the motion now on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This will be forward to council for final disposition. Which brings us to item B, City Hall roof replacement, the bid tabulation for that project.
Thank you, Your Honor. Memo in your packet. We recently opened our bids up for the City Hall roof replacement project. We received 3 bids, a little bid being from Cord Construction in the amount of $658,700. I would recommend approval of the little bid from Cord Construction in the amount of $658,700 to complete the City Hall roof replacement project. This work will be paid for as a split between general fund, the water depreciation and sewer depreciation, and the amounts you see listed in the memo. One of the items, a contributing factor to the cost, there is multiple layers built up on the existing roof. We have felts and stone and aggregate, an asphalt roof on the bottom, followed by insulation board, poly board, followed by the seal coat, the thin seal that's on top. Asbestos was found in all locations. There's 3 roof sections on this building. The building's about 15,500 square feet, plus or minus, and there's 3 different sections, but each of the sections has the asbestos-containing materials in it. So when we do the removal process, everything, including everything, will have to be removed and contained for asbestos. We can't. The original thought was we could take the poly off the top, those top layers off, and not have to do it that way. But based on the sampling and the testing that was done, we have to remove everything with asbestos content, treat it like it has asbestos content. So that did increase the prices somewhat. But there's money available to do the work.
Can I have a motion to approve the bid contract? Motion by Alderman Snow, second. For the roof? I'll second. Alderman Stevens, questions, comments? Okay, Alderman Sanderson, then Alderman Snow, and then Alderman Frank.
Yeah, I guess we got some pretty expensive repairs here. What other kind of things that we may have at this building that we may have to have a lot of expensive repairs with, is it worth looking at building new and having something,
Building a new city building?
Well, I'm just asking, has anybody looked at that? I know at one time, we looked at new fire departments and they were like $1 million or something. But it's just, this is an old building. I don't know if we got to take it for a ride when we got it or what, but it's a lot of money for a roof.
Becky?
We're still paying off the construction that was done when the city purchased this building. So we have about $450,000 left to pay off this building.
And I'm speaking very general terms. If you look at the square footage of this building and know that we're using all but the back part by the loading docks, which we use for storage, you're probably looking in excess of $15 million to build a building that will, at today's standards, that will give us the floor space that we need. Some other thoughts that have been talked about over the last couple of years was building a government center that would house fire, police, and government. That's $58 million for the estimate we were given on the location we had kind of talked about with some of the design people. The problem with doing those kinds of things, and that's really what a lot of communities are doing when they're faced with these situations now, because they own a lot of old buildings and they need to be upgraded and so forth and so on. The only way that that becomes any way doable is with what they call a public-private partnership, where you have an outside private partner who has access to the funding. There's $10 trillion sitting on the sidelines right now that's waiting to be spent. So what happens is, for those partnerships to work, they build whatever you want, turnkey, hand you the keys. You have a 25 or a 30 or a 40-year contract, but you have to have a dedicated line of revenue in stone that they're going to take their payments from. At the end of the period, when that agreement comes to maturity, they hand you the keys for good, and it's your building. But we currently do not have a dedicated stream of income that we could do that with. Instead, if we were going to do a public-private partnership, and there are some other options which will be presented to the council, is our problems on the south side of town with the stormwater management, at $40+ million. That would be a way to get that done in a more expeditious manner. We still would have to locate some kind of stream of revenue that comes every year to do that kind of thing. So unfortunately, this building was an aged building. We've been in this building since 2006, so it's 12 years. Since that period of time, we've had numerous roof leaks. We've done patch-it repairs like we seem to do on most everything. And at one point, when in 2013, we actually had mold growing up a wall, inside a wall, and some of the folks working up in the water billing department were getting sick. And I can't have people in my building getting sick from coming to work here. So we didn't anticipate the asbestos issue with this, but we need to fix this and figure we're gonna be here for a while and fix it right, which is way less of an expense than trying to build a brand new building and trying to find a way to finance that.
And I just brought that up because
Well, no,
I think
good
it's
thought.
something that's worth talking about, just to find out, you know, I'm sure people ask us about that, so.
We can't
thank
move
you.
into the Leaf building, won't work. So, or the old hospital,
Well,
we looked at that.
Sometimes these newer buildings, because of all the reparations that the government's made us do now, it gets cheaper almost to build from scratch, so I thought I'd ask.
No, it's a good question, and it's a good discussion to have, and we've looked at all of those things, and I think everybody would just love to have a government building that had all of those kinds of things done. Beck?
I just want to say the portion that the general fund or general administration, this was budgeted. We had budgeted $200,000. It's actually oh, I'm blanking now. It's been a long day.
Impact fee?
Anyway, it's budgeted. Let me come up with my thought. Hold on.
In the meantime, the new roof that's going to be proposed to be installed is going to be a rubber membrane roof. And it's also going to have some, right now it's a strictly flat roof. They are going to build some contour and stuff to it where they can to make everything drain better. It will be membraned. So what that means is when we do the removals and put that membrane down, we actually have to lift all our heat HVAC units off the roof to make that part of the process again, and that adds to your cost as well. But when this roof will be far superior to the multiple layers of different materials that we have up there now. It'll be all uniform and be nice and tight.
Yes.
I got it.
You're still-
Okay, this $200,000 was budgeted. It's from the interest that was sitting in the escrow fund that had accumulated through numerous years, and it's just this last year been moved to the capital fund for this type of project, so it is budgeted.
So additional questions or comments at this juncture? Yes, Alderman Frank.
Brent, I like that you explained what it was gonna be made of. The other question is, when do we plan to do this and how long will it take?
We plan to do it yet this fall. We waited till now so that because we have to remove the HVAC units, we didn't want to do it when it was 90 degrees out and not have any air conditioning available for employees. Likewise, we'd like to have it done before it gets real cold out. We have to have heat for the employees. So there's a narrow window in here that they will work. According to the contract, they'll have up to 90 days or 3 months. So it looks like they'll have through December theoretically to get the work done. But a lot of that stuff will have to do with some copings and some walls on the top perimeter that they'll have to do. The majority of the rubber putting down, that portion of it will be done first initially.
Everybody find a nice sweater at home. Alderman Porter.
I was just wondering if there's any type of warranty on this roof from the company?
There will be, and I'll have to get you the specifics on that. Without looking at my specs, I forget what the warranty was, but yes, there'll be warranty with it.
It's not a lifetime guarantee, unfortunately.
Yes, Mayor, will there be any danger to the employees in the building while this work is being processed?
If they stay off the roof, probably not.
It's a Class A friable.
Can we put the fire chief in here and use him as a test subject?
It is a Class A friable. It's been identified. The process for removal has been identified for the contract. That was included in the contract documents of what they have to do. There's air monitoring that has to be done up on the roof to make sure that the employees that are actually doing the work up there have the proper respiration, the proper safety, not knowing, actually not definite if they have to wear respirators. But those things, precautions will be part of the contract again, and that's why the price is when you look at it, you think it's a little bit high, but it's because you're dealing with the asbestos.
Anybody else? Then I have Alderman Sanderson.
And that'll be it. Just to follow up more what I was saying too, is, you know, we're expanding the city a little bit out west and Distillery Road. Do we have to have, build a fire station in any near future to have response times to meet criteria from the state? Or anything that we would have to build a building anyway?
That's been looked at numerous times in the past, and right now we're making our timing out there, response time is, I'd say it was, you know, NFPA required, meeting requirements. It'd be great to have something out there, but right now we're making ends meet right now. Stationed right here downtown.
Any additional questions or comments? Hearing, may I have a motion to approve, please?
We got motion.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved and passed to council for final disposition. Thank you. Under item C, parking lot 2, Mr. Crombie, would you like to come up and share with us what your request has been and where we are on it? And
hello, I'm Ryan Crombie with LHC Properties. We recently bought the adjacent building at 622 South State, the old Busch Gardens. We're turning that into a new bar restaurant and presented to the city about buying the parking lot just because we will be utilizing that parking lot substantially. We'd like to make some improvements to it and then also possibly talk to you guys about some outdoor entertainment in the future.
so we had it appraised, and we talked about sharing the cost. We went ahead and went through our appraiser, so if we consummate the deal, that there'll be some shared cost there. The appraisal came back for $60,000, and I wanted to open it up for discussion and see what the council thought about that. Who's first? Alderman Snow?
So Brent, can you tell us how much did we wind up paying? And I realize it was TIF money, if I recall correctly, in overlaying that parking lot the last time.
I'd have to look. I don't remember. It's not that much for an overlay. When I say not that much, I guess that's relative in my terms. I want to say it was maybe 8,000 to 10,000, maybe, if that.
Continue, please.
The other thing is, I realize that most of the parking that occurs there is for the facilities that are there, but there must be other occasions that the city had that as a parking lot that I'd be a little concerned about selling the entire parking lot, that maybe the city needs to retain part of the parking lot or sell him portions that he needs in order to facilitate the expansion of his deal, and the city still keeps the parking lot.
Would you care to comment on that?
I mean, we've had it since, I believe, May or June, and we have not had anybody use that parking lot since we've been in the building. I mean, it's been all our construction contractors, our employees, everything else, but I have not seen anybody from public using it.
Right.
Well, keep in mind, I guess, point of reference too. Before, parking lot number 2 has been there for a long time, and it used to have the Manley's facility across the street, the Manley lot there. Now with that being gone and that parking that's opened up there, that lot more than makes up for anything that the area was lacking, due to that being open and available now. So any of your overflow events from the community building and so forth, they'll tend to use the Manley parking lot before they'll use parking lot number 2.
Alderman Snow?
And I guess in that regard, though, we own that property, the Manley property, but hopefully with any luck, somebody will want that and do something with it. Then we lose that parking that might be needed for the overflow for the community building. So just toss that out there so we don't all just go blindly, future.
And that's a good point, and there's been a conversation numerous times with the community building folks what direction they need to go in the future for their parking. And that's, they need to build a parking garage over there on their lot. We've been a good community partner, and we don't charge them for using the lot. They had an opportunity to buy the Manley deal themselves and drag their feet until there was no chance for that deal to be consummated. It has been suggested to me several times that we needed to start charging them for using that lot, but we've decided that that's not something we wanted to do. I mean, the reality of it is this. We have that, all but the two houses over there, which at some point we will probably acquire and own that whole block. And if a developer came with a good project, we could also say, okay, how much space do you really need to develop this, and what are our requirements for parking going to be, with the understanding that that could be used for public parking in the evenings or whatever. Because the optimal building that was discussed previously about there would be like a 3-story building with high-end condos on the top 2 floors, and on the mezzanine level have retail, and they wouldn't take up that whole block. But that project, you know, somebody might come and want to build an office building there. So we don't really know. There's no way to predict the future, but I would concur. I've gone by Busch Gardens, and I've never known people to park at Busch Gardens except maybe on a Sunday, if there was a Sunday event downtown. And even then, it's very few people that park there. Yes, Alderman Porter.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring up is events like Heritage Days, Hometown Christmas, that type of thing. Parking is a premium on those type of events, and I'm wondering if we should be giving up public parking for that. And I guess my other question would be, what is your feeling on that? If that was to happen, are you going to put up signs that say that, you know, if people park there, they're not customers? Are you going to tow their vehicles and that type of thing?
No, absolutely not. You know, we want to be part of the community, not against it.
And I better throw this out there now, since this is getting pretty far afield. We have an opportunity to buy approximately 2.5 acre piece of property behind Burton Motors that runs behind all of those buildings on State Street all the way down to the river. You've probably seen the sign if you've driven down Lincoln. Jerry Rao wants to sell that, and he approached us probably 2 years ago initially with a conversation, and he was willing to sell us that to the city on an installment plan, so it wouldn't crimp our budget. And the figure that we had talked about at that time was about $75,000 for that 2.5 acres. Brent examined the surface over there and said that parking lot's in fairly reasonable shape. That gets used all the time for parking when we have events and so forth. Heritage Days, that got used anytime that the Apollo has an event. Ms. Tobin said that I should get back to Mr. Rao and offer him something a little different from the 75, which I will indeed do. So when Ryan made the offer to look into doing this, I resumed the conversation with Mr. Rao about parking, so that would be something to be an opportunity there. And yes, it's on the other side of the river, I get that. Alderman Snow.
And so, I realize the old Busch Gardens facility, there's also the garage. Do you own that building portion as well, so you control that part, or are we gonna hinder him from operating, or what the scoop there is?
No, that's all part of the same building that I bought, and we're not making any plans to have Kevin go anywhere.
So you're the landlord, okay.
Yes.
And in fact, he has no intent on kicking out the guy that rents space from him there.
Absolutely.
Until he's ready to go, and then try to help him find a different place. Alderman Brooks.
Yes, Mayor, there's always been something that concerned me with that structure over there. With the parking lot adjacent to it, if you load that lot up with vehicles, that could occur at certain instances, there's no egress from his building, because the boundary for our parking lot is right next to his building. I mean, right down it. You could park a car against those doors on the north side of the building and nobody can get out of there in an emergency. So I'm wondering if the fire chief has looked at that and approving the sale and making certain that those doors are always open and people can get out of there in an emergency.
Yeah, with that, Alderman Brooks, Lieutenant Wilcox is on that. He make those inspections. Things are being taken place. We're working on that, and I think we've already passed, I believe, all the permits, so.
Yeah, and we got 3 means of egress in that building now.
It's much improved today.
I was thinking that they could perhaps get egress by just buying 12 feet on the north side of the building from one end to the other. It would protect the guy at the end of the building. You wouldn't need the entire parking lot, and people want to park
Just
in
for
there like
egress-
they've always
Just for
did.
egress.
Pardon me?
Just for egress? Just for egress? that's
Yeah,
all?
if you give them 12, 14 feet or something along there, then you're saving the other part of the lot in case somebody does want to come in there and build someday. You do get an apartment building in there, what have you, a little mall
You're
or
talking
something.
about the Manley lot.
Pardon me?
You're talking about the Manley lot?
I'm talking about the lot next to
Well,
his.
they're not, nobody's gonna come in there and build another building on that lot.
Yeah, there's no place to put it.
There's no place to put it with
Well,
setbacks
then
and-
we'll have a public parking lot. I mean, we're a town of parking lots, Mayor. I mean, we can't sell off our parking lots. I mean, we would be without a town. But, no, I can see selling them 12 feet, 14 feet, all along his building there, so the guy in the back can get in and out, people going to his business in the backside and coming into the Bush or whatever. But there's ample parking across the street. We got the lot over there. People can park over there. There's no need in dumping this piece of property right now when we don't know what's going to happen in the future, is what I'm talking about.
Brent, did you have a comment?
Well, just a comment as far as egress and where the entrance is to the new Coach's Corners, what the facility is going to be called. Depending on how these discussions go and what the council's direction will be, you're right, there's going to be some parking realignments needed, some changes made there to get the ingress and egress out of the doors that Mr. Crombie would be looking for. So depending on how these discussions go, there will be some council action needed, required to accomplish those things. Again, depending on what the direction the council does want to go.
Okay, Alderman Snow and then Alderman Frank.
One other thing that jumped out at me is we do have street lights in there, correct? So at some point, those will need to be converted if the sale does take place. Those need to be put in his bill.
If the sale goes through with the total property, yes, there would have to be a disconnect from the city system and a connection made to however he ended up lighting his new facilities, because it depends on what he wants to do. As he indicated, he wants some outdoor activities. He wants to do other things other than just straight parking. So the lighting would ultimately be his responsibility to take care of.
Okay, Alderman Frank?
I just want to say what he's doing so far has been a positive, and I'm glad that he does want to invest and buy a parking lot. He's going to do all the refinishing or fixing up of the parking lot, and it's just that less money that we have to put forward every year on the parking lot.
Well, let's summarize here for a minute. Okay, we know what the appraised price is. We know what his site plan looks like. We've heard his testimony that he's not going to keep people from parking there, public parking park there, or have them towed. As owner, he'd be fully responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that parking lot. We've created, how many parking spaces did we create on the Manley lot? Do you remember, Brent?
Trivia questions tonight. I'd have to look. I don't remember.
There's a bunch, because when there's a big event at the community building, it fills up. So, you know, those are the facts as I see them now. We know what the asking price, the appraised price is, so forth. Alderman Stevens.
Well, that was my question. I questioned the appraised price because it's a finished parking lot. What would it cost us to redo this lot? Because we just sold property right over here to Russell here for just a little bit less than that for non-improved. This is a total parking lot, so the $60,000 doesn't sound like enough to me.
Well, we have the appraisal, which, you know, we can bring to you to look at. It's done by the same person who has done the appraisal of the Leith Building, the appraisal that we've asked for on the hospital property and the property next to the hospital. He's a certified appraiser. And Becky?
And I believe he did the appraisal, he worked with you on the appraisal of that building.
Mm-hmm.
So he's familiar with the property.
Yes.
Alderman Snow?
On a good note, if we do sell it, it comes back on the tax roll at some point, so.
You do that.
Yeah.
So additional questions or comments?
I just want to know what company appraised it.
Becky, do you?
It's Rally Appraisal out of Rockford.
Additional questions or comments? Yes, Alderman Borowitz.
So you want to purchase this parking lot for events, I'm assuming, because you're not going to restrict anybody from using it, and anybody that wants to come to your restaurant could freely park there. So you want to spend $60,000 on it. What kind of events are you going to have there? Because I'm assuming that's why you want to purchase it.
Yes and no. I mean, we got to take one step at a time first. We got to get the restaurant open first. But the main reason I want to purchase it is I can maintain it differently than the city would. You know, I'd like to seal coat it, stripe it, put parking blocks up, all that kind of stuff. We've talked to the mayor already. We've talked to Brent, and it's just not feasible with you guys owning it. We'd also like to put a dumpster enclosure in, so it includes the dumpster for the restaurant as well as the grease trap. And since it's your guys' property, we can't.
Alderman Brooks.
Yes. Has anyone surveyed the neighbors around there as to how they feel about this? Has the former state representative been contacted that owns the house on the corner? And the other neighbors up and down the street, have they've been talked to about holding events in that parking lot? And I mean, it's going to affect their property.
And that's a good point, but we haven't gotten that far yet because we just brought it for the discussion tonight.
When will we get that far?
I would have to do a special use permit and everything else once we acquired it.
If there is a motion and a second and an approval to move this forward, we will do that forthwith.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that should be a key item.
Alderman Snow.
I make the motion that go ahead and sell it.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying. Alderman Freeman.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Roll call vote, just for the record, please.
Borowitz?
No.
Brooks?
No.
Crawford?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
Freeman?
Aye.
Porter?
Yes.
Sanderson?
Aye.
Snow?
Aye.
Stevens?
No.
6 in favor.
Okay, the motion is carried and will go to council for final disposition. We will forthwith inform the neighbors of intent. Can you handle that?
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our agenda this evening.
Thank you.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion by Alderman Crawford, second by Alderman Borowitz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are now adjourned.